Got underway for a man convicted of a double murder during a home invasion in 2014. And to a lot of people's surprise, it was very brief. WRAL's Amanda Lamb joins us live from the Wake County Justice Center to explain. Amanda?
Yeah, Gerald, the testimony here was over before lunchtime. The state just put on 2 witnesses, and the defense put on no witnesses, which is highly unusual when the defendant is facing the possibility of the death penalty. Closing arguments are set for tomorrow morning. The stakes are high for Donovan Richardson. A jury will decide if he spends his life in prison or is sentenced to death.
Do just what you've told us you would do. Keep an open mind, consider all the factors.
The state presented witnesses who shared their loss.
You know, it wasn't easy at all because I was the one that found it.
Neighbor Ruby Bullock said 78-year-old victim Arthur Brown routinely checked in on her, helped her, and did the same for so many others.
He's terribly missed, not just with the family, but in the community.
The whole family loved David, and David loved everybody in the family.
The nephew of the other victim, 66-year-old David McKoy, said his uncle had a learning disability, but Brown took him under his wing. In July 2014, McKoy's nephew found the home surrounded by crime scene tape and a cousin crying in the yard.
She said, "They're dead. They're dead. David and Arthur is," she said, "they're dead." And I fell to my knees.
We believe that under the facts and the law, that life is the appropriate verdict.
Defense attorneys decided not to put on testimony, saying the facts of the case speak for themselves.
Only if you're fully satisfied and entirely convinced that the death penalty is the only appropriate punishment can you impose it under the law.
Now, one correction, there was one witness for the defense, but that person, the stepsister of the defendant in this case, testified out of the purview of our camera. The judge ordered that no cameras be present for that testimony. So all of the testimony that happened today in the courtroom in front of the camera, we showed you for the state. And again, there will be closing arguments tomorrow morning. Back to you.
Very unusual for them not to call any witnesses on behalf of the defense, other than the one that you all didn't get a chance to see. But all right.
Deliberating the sentence of a man convicted of 2 murders during a home invasion. Their choices: life in prison or the death penalty. WRAL's Amanda Lamb has been following this case extensively and joins us now with what happened during closing arguments. Amanda.
David, we understand that the jury just went home for the night after about an hour and a half of deliberations. They'll be back in the morning. And, you know, there's a lot at stake here. It was very obvious during these closing arguments today that the weight of this case was on the shoulders of these attorneys. Prosecutors said this is a death penalty case. They say if killing 2 senior citizens in their bed is not a death penalty case, then what is? But defense attorneys said the death penalty is reserved for the worst of the worst cases, and they say this one doesn't qualify. Donovan Richardson put his future in the hands of the same jury that convicted him of 2 counts of murder and the deaths of 2 men shot and killed during a 2014 home invasion.
This case, I submit to you, is everyone's worst nightmare.
Arthur Brown was shot to death in his own bed, and he was hit twice in the heart.
Prosecutors argued that Richardson deserves the death penalty.
You will just be deciding as 12 jurors from this county what the conscience of this community is.
Sitting here in front of you, scared to death, as you're going to decide whether he lives or dies.
Defense attorneys pointed out, despite Richardson's conviction under the felony murder rule, another co-defendant, Greg Crawford, actually shot Brown's roommate, David McKoy.
We know Donovan Richardson did not shoot David McKoy, period.
Defense attorneys also argued that the co-defendants are just facing prison time and that Richardson deserves the same punishment.
Ladies and gentlemen, this simply is not a death penalty case. The state has not met its burden.
He did this, not you. You're speaking the truth, and you're telling us what the appropriate punishment is, without regard to sympathy.
Now, the judge spent about an hour and a half instructing the jurors on the law this afternoon before they started their deliberations. They have a lot of aggravating and mitigating factors to consider, so they will be back again, as I said, tomorrow morning at 9:30 to begin that process again, David.
And we will continue to monitor this very closely.
Donovan sits here now 24 years old, looking at a life of literally living hell.
A plea from Donovan Richardson's attorney today tried to convince the jury to spare the convicted murderer's life. Richardson, accused of killing 2 men in 2014, could be the first person sentenced to death in Wake County in more than a decade. Ed Crump is live at the Wake County Justice Center, where jurors began deciding life or death late this afternoon. Ed?
Yeah, and we've just gotten word, Tisha, that they've just made the decision to go home for the day, so the deliberations in the death penalty phase of this trial are over for today. Now, this is the 9th time that Wake County prosecutors have gone for the death penalty since it was last handed up back in 2007. In the past 8 capital trials since then, the jury has opted not to impose the death penalty, but to go instead for life without parole. When Donovan Richardson's attorneys failed to get a not guilty verdict last week, they had to change strategy. Today, in closing arguments in the sentencing phase of the capital murder trial, they admitted his guilt. But at the same time, they tried to convince jurors to spare the life of the 24-year-old.
We call it life without parole, but it's not a life. It's an existence. That's all it is. Free choice is a memory, an absolute memory.
But prosecutors reminded jurors no one forced Richardson to break into the home of 78-year-old Arthur Brown in July of 2014 near Fuquay-Varina. Jurors were told Richardson and an accomplice planned to steal guns and money from the home, but when Richardson encountered Brown, he used a pistol to murder him.
And he shoots him 3 times, once in the hand and twice through the chest, through and through the headboard of his bed. Arthur Brown was shot to death in his own bed.
The prosecutor also said Richardson supplied the gun that killed Brown's roommate, 66-year-old David McKoy. The man accused of that murder pled guilty and is serving life without parole. The defense argued that jurors should spare Richardson's life for a number of reasons, including the fact that he has 2 young sons and that his mother is seriously ill. But prosecutors countered that the 2 murder victims have families too, families that will never see them alive again. Now, death penalty trials are very expensive for taxpayers, so this one's being watched closely by anti-death penalty people who argue that maybe if they don't get it this time, Wake should quit pursuing death penalty cases. The jury will be back and resume their deliberations at 9:30 tomorrow morning, and we'll be watching it closely and have the latest for you, not only on the air, but on abc11.com online.